The river did not look dangerous that morning. If you stood on the Clark Avenue Bridge in Cleveland, Ohio, and looked down at the Cuyahoga River on June 22, 1969, you wouldn't immediately think you were staring at something that could catch fire. You might think it looked wrong, thick, slow, unnatural. The surface didn't reflect the sky the way a river should. Instead, it carried a dull, oily sheen, layers of industrial waste floating like a skin over something that no longer behaved like water. There were streaks of orange, green, and black moving together in silent patterns. In some places, the liquid barely flowed at all, as if it had grown tired of pretending to be a river. And if you leaned a little closer, you would smell it. A sharp mixture of oil, chemicals, metal, and decay. The kind of smell that didn't just pass through your nose, but stayed. By 1969, Cleveland was not just a city. It was a machine, a critical node in America's industrial system. Steel mills lined the riverbanks like fortresses of smoke and fire. Oil refineries processed endless streams of crude. Chemical plants operated day and night, producing the materials that fueled everything from automobiles to warfare. And the river ran through all of it. Not as a natural resource, but as a dumping ground. For decades, the logic had been simple. Waste needed somewhere to go. The river was there, so they used it. There were no modern environmental protections. No federal oversight strong enough to stop it. No widespread public outrage. Because the culture of the time believed something very different from what we believe today. Pollution meant productivity. Dirty air meant factories were working. Oily water meant industry was thriving. Smoke in the sky meant jobs. And Cleveland was thriving, at least on the surface. But underneath that success, something was building, layer by layer, year by year, invisible to most, ignored by many. Industrial discharge poured directly into the river, not treated, not filtered, just released. Oil waste from refineries, sludge from steel production, toxic chemicals from manufacturing plants, paint residues, heavy metals, solvents, all mixing together into something that no longer followed the basic rules of nature. By the early 20th century, the Cuyahoga River had already caught fire multiple times, each fire larger than the last, each one a warning. The 1952 fire was particularly severe. It caused over $1 million in damage, a massive amount at the time. Boats burned, bridges were damaged, flames shot high into the air. And still, nothing fundamentally changed, because the fires were treated as accidents, not symptoms. By the late 1960s, however, something in America was shifting. People were starting to ask questions, not just about war, not just about civil rights, but about the environment. And then came June 22nd. It was a Sunday, late morning. The industrial zone was quieter than usual. Fewer workers, less noise. But the river remained the same, heavy, silent, waiting. At approximately 11:30 a.m., a train passed over the river on one of the bridges. This was routine, nothing unusual. Trains crossed that bridge all the time. But trains produce sparks. Tiny ones, almost invisible, usually harmless. One of those sparks fell down toward the river. Under normal conditions, nothing would have happened. Water doesn't burn. But this wasn't normal water. The spark landed on a patch of oil and debris thick enough to act like fuel, and in an instant, the surface ignited. Not slowly, not gradually, but violently. Flames spread across the river's surface with shocking speed, as if they had been waiting. As if the entire river had been primed for this exact moment. Within seconds, fire stretched across a large section of the water. Bright orange against black sludge, smoke rising fast and thick. The heat intensified quickly. Nearby structures began to feel it. Wooden pilings smoldered. Steel components expanded under the sudden temperature shift. The underside of the bridge itself was threatened. Witnesses later described the scene as surreal. A river on fire does something strange to the human mind. Because it breaks expectation. It shouldn't be possible. And yet there it was. Firefighters were called immediately. They arrived quickly, but they faced a problem no standard training had prepared them for. How do you extinguish a fire when the thing that's burning is the water? They used foam. They used water streams aimed at the flames. They worked to contain rather than extinguish. Within about 20-30 minutes, the visible fire was under control. But the damage had already been done, not just physically, but symbolically. Because this time, the story didn't disappear. In previous decades, river fires had been treated as local incidents, minor news, industrial accidents. But in 1969, the media landscape had changed. National publications were paying attention. Time magazine ran a story describing the Cuyahoga as a river that oozes rather than flows. That phrase hit hard, because it was true. Suddenly the fire became more than an event. It became evidence. Evidence that something was broken, not just in Cleveland, but across the entire country. Other rivers were polluted too: the Hudson, the Chicago River, the Los Angeles River. Air pollution was rising. Cities were choking. Smog covered skylines. But fire made it undeniable. You can ignore dirty water. You can ignore bad smells. You can even ignore sickness for a while, but you cannot ignore a river that burns. The public reaction was immediate: shock, anger, disbelief. People began to ask questions that had been avoided for years. Who allowed this? Why was nothing done? How many other places were like this? And perhaps the most dangerous question of all: what else are we ignoring right now? The Cuyahoga fire became a turning point, not because it was the biggest disaster, but because it was the moment people finally paid attention. In 1970, the United States witnessed something unprecedented. The first Earth Day. Millions of Americans participated. Not thousands, millions. Schools, cities, communities, all demanding environmental reform. The government could no longer ignore it. That same year, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, was created, a federal body with the power to regulate pollution. Then came the laws: the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. For the first time, industries were required to take responsibility. Waste could no longer be dumped freely. Water had to be treated. Air had to be monitored. And slowly, the damage began to reverse. The Cuyahoga River changed, not overnight, not quickly, but steadily. By the 1980s, signs of life returned. Fish, birds, clearer water. What had once burned now supported life again. But the story remains important, because it proves something uncomfortable. Disaster doesn't always come from sudden destruction. Sometimes it builds quietly, over years, decades, until one day, a single spark reveals everything. And in 1969, that spark fell into a river. Like, comment, and subscribe for more deep, powerful historical stories.